Hello, and welcome to Palisade Corporation's webcast, Teaching Decision Making in MBA Classes, presented by Phil Rogers, Clinical Assistant Professor at the C.T. Bauer College of Business at the University of Houston. My name is Jamison Romeo Hall, and I will be your host today, and I'll be available to help answer WebEx technical questions by chat. If you experience technical difficulties joining this WebEx session, please dial 1-866-229-3239. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience today. The attendee list is suppressed to maintain attendee privacy. We will be holding a Q&A session at the conclusion of today's presentation. You may ask an online question anytime throughout the presentation today by clicking on the question mark icon located on the floating toolbar. I would also encourage you to visit our website and sign up for a free trial download of our software, including our lead products, At Risk, and the Decision Tool Suite. We invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy today's presentation. In a moment, Phil, you have...
Okay, I'm now the presenter.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to be sharing my desktop.
That's correct.
Which, let's see, starts with, yes, I just wanted to bring up the Bauer website at the University of Houston, just to make it part of the record. University of Houston has an outstanding business school, constantly going up in the ratings, and offers many different programs in the Graduate School of Business. I'm teaching primarily MBAs, Executive MBAs, and later on I'll tell you some interesting programs we have in that area. On that site, if you went to the directory, you'd find me, Phil Rogers, that's who's talking to you right now. That's a bit of a bio on me, that if you want some background on that. And then for further reference, at some point you might want to pop over to the Palisade site. Under their case studies, there's a review of how we use the Decision Tool Suite and other software in teaching business modeling and decision making in the business school here at the University of Houston. So I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint presentation and get rolling now that you know who I am. I'm talking about teaching business modeling and decision making at the University of Houston. As background, as Jamison's already alluded to, and I've showed you the website, I actually worked at Exxon for a long time. I had a 33-year career there, working in a lot of operations research / management science / management / decision-making functions, quantitative analysis, and retired in 2002, and then hooked on first as an adjunct and eventually full-time here at the University of Houston. Started out teaching statistics, and over time have introduced a couple of electives in the business school and decision-making. Started as a pilot, an initial course in 2005 with all of 6 students, so I was really lucky that the department chairman let me put it on and try it out. And that's evolved now to 2 courses at the graduate level, 1 at the undergraduate level, and now the total enrollment taking these courses and using Palisade products in the Decision Tool Suite as well as others, now getting just about 600 students a year. I'm going to focus today on the graduate courses. If someone has particular interest in the undergraduate courses, I'm happy to field that either at the end of this presentation or offline at some future point. Well, we offer 2 courses now, both of them electives, primarily taken by MBAs, but occasionally MS Finance and MS Accounting people. The first one is Business Modeling for Competitive Advantage. The title is actually kind of a play on words in a sense that the idea is that being able to do this spreadsheet modeling gives your company you're working for a competitive advantage, and it also gives you as an employee a competitive advantage vis-a-vis your peers. These skills are becoming more and more the basic language of decision-making in business. So the first one is an elective, and in the MBA program, and actually in the Executive MBA program, it's just about to become a core course that will be in the curriculum for everyone. The follow-on course that a subset of people take if they have room in their elective slate is called Managerial Decision Making. It's a follow-on course, also an elective in the program. The goal of both of these courses is really to be able to model business problems and through those models gain insight through sensitivity analysis and get a better understanding of what's driving the particular, whether it's maximization of profit or best utilization of resources, whatever the objective is, minimizing risk. This is the idea, is that having a model enables you to do that better. The textbook we use, normally I wouldn't jump right into it, but I'm going to refer to the textbook from time to time, so I thought I'd go into it. I happen to use Practical Management Science by Winston and Albright. It's been the revised 3rd edition the last couple of years that uses Excel 2007. Edition 4 was just released in April, and that uses Excel 2010. Not a whole lot of difference between the two. If you're interested in getting that book, I'd say get the one that is in sync with the version of Excel, because then all the pictures will match. There are a couple of other textbooks out there that are being used in other schools, and they're fine and they're good. For various reasons, I've stuck with Practical Management Science. One is by two guys at Dartmouth, Powell and Baker, Management Science, the Art of Modeling with Spreadsheets. And then there's the one by Cliff Ragsdale called Spreadsheet Modeling and Decision Analysis. Curiously, I have a philosophical issue with all three of the books, and if I was writing them, I'd have kind of the material organized in a different way. They're organized by algorithm or by technique rather than by business problem, and I think that at some point, it's certainly the way I run my course, is to be driven by the business problem, not really the mathematics or the algorithms underlying the solutions. Well, these are the textbooks used, and the first one, Practical Management Science, comes with a link to a student version of the Decision Tools Suite, which since you're all connected through Palisade, you've probably heard about one way or the other, but I'll go into more detail as we go on. The topics we cover in this first course. We first go off, we spend the first couple of weeks on Excel. Now, one could actually, you've seen the books, you know, they're 4 inches thick Bibles on Excel and all kinds of books that enable you to actually become Microsoft certified as an Excel expert. That's fine, but that's not what we're shooting for. We shoot for using Excel as vocabulary to do the model building that really counts for us. So the way I view this is that if you were an author that was going to write poetry or prose, you'd have to have a good vocabulary to be worth reading. And that's true, I feel, for model building. You have to have a pretty good vocabulary in Excel, but you don't have to be an expert to the point that you can pass some kind of Microsoft certification and know how to do all kinds of whiz-bang things. In particular, I'm just kind of summarizing the main features that we go over. Basically, the key features and functions that you see up there that probably most of you know, but if not, we make sure that people know them by starting with some very simple models that invoke those functions and features, especially the what-if analysis using goal-seek and data tables. Really are critical to forging ahead and doing some serious model building. We also cover a bit of a unit on spreadsheet engineering. Powell and Baker have a fabulous chapter on that, and that covers things like the proper way to construct spreadsheets and workbooks, actually. Workbook design, how to organize your spreadsheet, general ground rules like keeping it simple and documenting what you're doing, and understanding the various parts that go into a model and all of that kind of stuff. So we cover a bit of spreadsheet engineering, and then we move on into some actual applications. Built into Excel is a handy-dandy curve fitting tool where you just plot up some pictures. Maybe you have some data on demand for a product as a function of price, and you want to fit a curve to that, so we talk about fitting various linear and nonlinear curves. Then we move on to regression and forecasting. For those, we use one of the tools in the Decision Tools suite that comes with the textbook, and that is StatTools, which is a really neat statistical package that the students can use to very quickly be productive in developing regression and forecasting tools. Then we move on to optimization. We spend the middle third of the course on optimization. For that, we use Excel's built-in solver, which is an add-in that if you wanted to do optimization and you opened up Excel and you weren't familiar with it, you might have trouble and say, well, where is solver? You would get to solver by making it an add-in. So you'd go to the Office button or the File button if you have 2010. You'd go to Excel Options, Add-ins, and you'd see a box for solver, and you would check that box, and then you're good to go. You would go to Data on the ribbon and then click Solver, and you would get the Solver dialog box. It's an excellent tool for optimization, which very often really means the optimal allocation of resources. We emphasize a wide variety of applications in marketing, finance, operations management, all kinds of things, project management. And the emphasis, as I said, is not so much on whether the problem is integer, linear, nonlinear, or what algorithm has to be used, but rather what's the application. Because it turns out determining whether you want to use an integer programming algorithm or an evolutionary problem solver is really ultimately just the click of a button. So I think the emphasis should be on the problem solved. We focus on identifying the components that go into building a model, parameters like input, like what are the costs, what are the selling prices, what are the availabilities of resources, what decisions have to be made, for example, which projects you're going to do or what products you're going to make, what your objective is it maximizing profit, is it minimizing cost, and what the constraints are. And from there, the whole point of doing that is not to get that one and only answer, but then to be able to do a sensitivity analysis. And with that book that I mentioned by Winston and Albright, it comes with something called Solver Table, which I find to be an infinitely more useful sensitivity analysis to what comes with Excel's built-in solver, which when I was in graduate school many, many years ago, getting a PhD in operations research, that approach was fine, but Solver Table is much more user-friendly and appropriate for an MBA and business audience, I feel. So that's the optimization middle third of the course. The final third of the course is dealing with risk and uncertainty. Certainly that's a big part of a lot of problems, and for that we use Palisade's at risk. Many of you no doubt familiar with it. It's one of the key components in the Decision Tools suite. Lots of problems can be done with the textbook version. Sometimes you end up outstripping its capability, but we kind of deal with that when that happens. The topics we cover in using at-risk are how to access various probability distributions like the uniform, log normal, normal, discrete, and all the rest, how you actually model uncertainty, the impact different input distributions can have on your answers. For example, what if you assume the demand for a product is triangular in nature in the terms of the probability distribution? What if you switched it to a normal distribution? How does it affect your output? We look at dealing with simultaneously multiple uncertain variables, and then if these variables are correlated. The package at risk is incredibly rich with a lot of other features that once you've developed a model, you can run through with the students and show them how to use them. Very powerful indeed. We do some optimization, what I would call a poor man's optimization in this first class, by using an at-risk built-in feature called Risk Sim Table, which is analogous to using a data table in native Excel, where you say, okay, I've been using an order quantity to try to optimize my sales business, and I've been using 200. How would my results change if I tried 180, 190, 200, 210, or 220? And I'd want to pick the best in terms of optimizing whatever my objective was. Well, for that, Risk Sim Table is a very handy-dandy way to do that, It doesn't give you the exact optimum, but at least in terms of the cases you want to run, you can pick the best one. In the second course, we use a built-in tool within the decision tool suite that can be used to just jump right to the optimal solution. The key thing is interpretation of output. For us, looking at the means of output distributions, the standard deviation, things like value at risk, which might be something like the probability of losing more than a certain amount of money, and so on. Again, sensitivity analysis being really key. Moving on to the second course, which is the managerial decision making, we cover a potpourri of other topics, and the prime feature in the course, are projects developed by the students. I'll go into that in a second. One of the techniques we look at in quite depth is something called the analytic hierarchy process. This is an outstanding approach to solving problems where the various criteria and objectives are not quantitative. The whole premise builds on a quote from Einstein that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So there are a lot of qualitative and subjective things that go into decision making. How do you handle that? And for that, we use analytic hierarchy process. If it sounds intriguing to you, I encourage you to go on the website expertchoice.com to get an idea of what that can do. And that's our students spend some time on that, and they're fully capable of solving problems using AHP via expert choice by the end of the semester. One of the other packages within the decision tools suite is neural networks, which is a fascinating way to forecast some items, or do prediction or categorization. I won't go into that now, but it's a fascinating add-on and alternative to tools like discriminant analysis and regression analysis. Very powerful statistical technique, and with some very good examples that you can use to kind of understand what the possibilities are, examples that are embedded in the help part of neural tools. We also use the decision tools suite add-on called Precision Tree as an implementation of decision trees. That's really good for making sequential decisions, and we spend some time on that topic as well. For simulation optimization, rather than just relying on the poor man's risk sim table, we use Risk Optimizer, which is a built-in facility that will actually optimize the parameters of interest, or the decision variables of interest, I should say, within your simulation model. We look at discriminant analysis and cluster analysis. Those are two topics covered in the Winston and Albright book. And I also run a unit on another book I found absolutely fascinating. Actually, my wife found it in a bookstore last summer, and I jumped all over it. I think it's really fascinating. It's by a guy named Sam Savage, called The Flaw of Averages. I'd seen a reference to that term and Savage within the Albright-Winston book, but getting his book really opens your eyes to all that's involved in falling into traps of using averages, understanding lots of statistical concepts in very understandable terms instead of more or less what Savage calls the steam era engine of going over statistics. He has a much more modernistic and appealing approach to covering topics, and I review a bunch of those in the class. And as I said, the highlight of this second class are student projects. The enrollment is limited, so I can manage it all. I wanted to limit it to 18, but the demand just keeps forcing me to jack it up. So this coming semester we'll have 8 teams of 3 students, and each team has to do 2 projects using different approaches: AHP, simulation, optimization using solver, neural networks, and precision tree, whatever they want to use. And because at the University of Houston, we do have some full-time MBAs, but lots of those folks have had previous work experience, and we have a whole lot of part-time MBAs. And these are students who are working in the Houston area, and they come to school in the evening, taking typically 2 courses a semester. And these students are working at all of the big energy companies in the Houston area. They're working at Hewlett-Packard, or for all the supporting organizations that support the oil industry here in Houston, and sometimes some nonprofits, and we've had some great student projects coming from nonprofit, real estate companies, and all the rest. So the projects that come out of this are extremely interesting. I now have a list of over 100 projects that these students have done. I'll review a couple of these right now, just to give you an idea. Here's a topic done by a student who was at Marathon Oil at the time, working with a company that supplied the design of all the offshore infrastructure that has to support production from a well. And their question was, if they're undertaking a very expensive multi-billion-dollar investment, is it worth buying more reliable equipment up front, something with a longer mean time to failure, these component parts? Is it worth designing redundancy into the system, spending that money up front, or having slightly, not still reliable, but slightly less reliable equipment might be more prone for failure during the life of the reservoir? But of course, if that happens, then you're getting interruptions to your production, and that's costing you money. The amount of money it's going to cost is uncertain because you don't even know what the price of crude will be then. As you can see, that's an ideal candidate for a simulation model, and that's what those guys built. Another one was a student I had last semester whose family owns about a dozen Holiday Inns around the place, one of them at Hobby Airport. And the decision there was to decide when they have the opportunity to get a group deal. For example, let's say the stewardesses or flight attendants rather, or pilots from Southwest who are laying over at Hobby Airport, does it pay for them to grab that deal at a discounted price or rely on walk-in traffic for which they can charge closer to the rack rate? And you can see there are uncertainties into what the rack rate demand is going to be, possibly uncertainties as to group deals that might come up later in the year. And the idea was to play around, build a model that would have you have them optimize at what price they should grab a group deal and how much space they should lock up with a group deal. Again, a perfect candidate for simulation. All of these on the first slide are simulation type projects. I had a student working at Shell Energy looking at their exposure to all their customers in the credit area. This was a fascinating project. As you may or may not know, Houston's got a huge medical center. It's got the #1 cancer hospital in the United States and all kinds of great hospitals. In fact, in the medical center, there are 70,000 employees. So it's just a huge, it's bigger than any college campus you can think of. Anyway, I had a student working there in the organ transplant area, looking at 4 major kinds of transplants: liver, heart, lung, and kidney. And the issue there is how much deposit to demand from patients who are coming in. The higher the deposit you demand up front, you're going to discourage people who might be coming in from out of town or even within Houston. But since it's uncertain as to how much the patients will be able to collect by insurance, the hospital may get stiffed if they take too small a deposit and a patient ends up with a high medical bill and their insurance company doesn't cover everything. So you have probability distributions on what the total cost will be for, let's say, a kidney transplant or a liver transplant. You have the probability distribution of recovery depending on some parameters of the patient. And you have once you have a model built, you can try out what the what your ultimate cash flow looks like with different assumptions on the deposit you require from a patient. Again, a perfect example for simulation. Here's another one. I'm not sure. Let's see how we're doing on time. Kind of a half hour. Maybe I'll just roll out the last 3 simulation models. You can have a look. And if anyone has a question on it toward the end, they can say, what was that one on deep water drilling rigs? Could you go over that? The last one being the design of a hotel. How many double rooms and single rooms you should build when you have the issue of not knowing the demand for each of those on any given night. And the fact that if you actually build fewer number of single rooms and you're overbooked with a certain probability, you can put those singles into a double room. So there's some incentive to build more double rooms. On the other hand, the cost of construction is more for double rooms. So taking that all into account, what's the best hotel design? Some of the other projects from the past, these are using Solver's optimization capability within Excel. Had a student working at LyondellBasell, that's a chemical plant here in Houston, or a chemical business that has some big plants here in Houston. They were looking at various ways to dispose of waste, and as you might imagine, the most ecologically sound ways were the most expensive ones. And they were able to build a nice model that enabled them to be on, if you will, the efficient frontier, which said, given the amount of money they want to spend on waste disposal, how much of each of the 4 different types of waste disposal they should use. An interesting portfolio type problem when here your portfolio is getting rid of waste, different ways to get in waste. Air Liquide is a French company that has huge operations here in Houston with their industrial gases that they distribute. And the way that's run is basically supplier-managed inventory. So Air Liquide not only manages the inventory of their hundreds of customers, but they actually own the inventory tankage at the customer sites. So if they have a certain amount of money to invest in these sites, where do you want to invest that money? Why would you want to invest money? By increasing tankage at a given site? Because the more you do, the bigger the tankage at a given site, the fewer trips you have to make to that customer, and you can make very efficient routing of your multiple vehicles to supply the customers. So that was quite a very difficult problem that that student undertook. Here's another one. We had a student working for a developer that built basically assisted living type housing complexes, and they were composed of independent assisted living, and eventually people could move from the assisted living to Alzheimer's type units. And the question was, how many of each unit should they build given transition rates, given construction costs, and so on, and space limitations and so forth. Here's one, the former Continental Airlines, which is now merged with United and is moving up to Chicago, but Continental has been the headquarters, Houston's been the headquarters for Continental, and it's a huge hub here in Houston for Continental planes, and all those planes have to be catered. Continental has its own catering unit. How do you minimize the number of catering truck drivers you need to service the fleet? That was an interesting one. As I mentioned, we offered degrees to people in China as well. I'll go into have another few words on that. I was teaching a bunch of managers and executives from PetroChina who their student project was gas and oil production in Turkmenistan, trying to optimize how much to produce from each well to feed into the pipeline that would take the product to China, taking into account constraints on demand for oil and gas and pipeline power consumption and capacity. Very interesting. I'll have a few more words on that when I talk about teaching in China and having to teach this kind of stuff in a compressed environment. Here's another one. Actually, this is very sad for me because this was done by a group of Libyan students before the conflict flared up recently. And at the time, they were spending a whole lot of time rebuilding the infrastructure of the country. Unfortunately, it's gone the other way, but if you can imagine this in a site where you have many new sites that require concrete and have to be built, where's the best place to locate the concrete plant, given the demand? You know, part of it is the distance traveled. You'd like to be close to the sites in some sense, but you're also influenced by the demand at each of the sites. And finally, as another example, Horizon Wind Energy here in Houston was looking at a problem of the optimal allocation of 1,000 wind turbines to various wind farms. Again, a fairly complicated problem that they were able to do during the semester. All right, more projects quickly. This is using other techniques besides simulation, which was the first lot, and optimization using Solver, which was the second lot. Here, a recent project this semester was if you're drilling and you have various possible pay sands or targets, where do you stop? These students used Precision Tree to do that. Waste Management developed a model using analytic hierarchy process, looking at the optimal allocation of some $800 million in capital to various projects. They couldn't do them all, but here's a classic example where you have some qualitative criteria that are driving you, like they're worried about organic growth, diversification, customer focus, reducing cost, and environmental sustainability. These are the major thrusts of the company now. And the company has to decide when no one project is going to feed into all of those objectives simultaneously and to the best degree. So you're going to have to make trade-offs. AHP is an excellent way to do that, and the students built an excellent project to do that. Another project using decision tree, Petrobras, you know, is the Brazilian oil giant. They have a refinery here in Houston that imports Nigerian crude through a processing agreement. They process the crude and then ship the finished products down to Nigeria. The question was, what should that processing agreement look like? And they built a decision tree to kind of help them in their analysis of that problem. Another AHP project, just to show you the diversity, it's not only energy type stuff that this is good for. We had a student in a local municipal school district, the Stafford School District, Stafford just southwest of downtown Houston. They were proposing a bond, a $50 million bond, sorry, a $40 million bond, but they had $50 million worth of projects that they wanted to do. Once again, what are your objectives for these projects? Enhancing student athletics, educational stuff, teacher facilities. You've got all of these things, transportation. You've got all of these things, and you have to choose from among the many, many projects. And you also have many stakeholders who have a voice in this, helping the school district decide the best way to spend $40 million when you've got $50 million worth of projects. Very successful project using the analytic hierarchy process. And another AHP one was an acquisition type project. This is also an excellent application for AHP where you're trying to determine the best companies to acquire. And there are all kinds of qualitative criteria going into that, like how they fit with what you've got, the corporate culture, and on and on. So that gives you an idea. I just almost randomly selected a subset of the over 100 projects that these students have done. The primary thrust of both of these courses is to build these models that can be useful in making decisions. And there's a famous statistician, George Box, who's well known for having said all models are wrong, some are useful. And the point is to build these simulation models or optimization models or AHP models. They won't be exactly right, but you start with a simple model, and then you can continually crank in enhancements and get them closer to reality, ultimately getting some use of seeing how various parameters and decision variables drive your outcomes in all of these models. The other major thrust that I emphasize, I picked up this quote about a year ago: a well-trained man knows how to answer questions. An educated man knows what questions are worth asking. It's not only solving that one model that you've got, all right? Find the minimum cost way to supply your customers. It doesn't stop there. Now that you've got that answer to that question, what are the questions you want to ask? And I'm constantly working with my students to, once they get a solution, now you're the owner of the business. What questions does this lead to? Gee, what if I had more raw material? What if I could change my price for selling the product? What if I could add more inventory to stock products in the interim? I think, what if the probability distribution was different than what I've assumed? Answering those questions is really key to getting insight to your business. Another major, well, the sensitivity analysis I mentioned, that's really a key to everything we're doing. It's not just to find one answer. The whole point to gain insight into the business problems. Lots of hands-on, lots of doing, homework assignments where they solve problems, projects as you see in that second course that we've talked about, where the students working in teams develop their own projects from their own places of work. I also run a unit on communication skills. Having worked in trying to, quote, sell, unquote, models within Exxon Corporation, where I developed a lot of models myself, you have to be sensitive to the management team that you're talking to. And you have to kind of really key into the frequency that they listen in on and tune your own radio dial to that frequency. Otherwise, you'll have developed a model that won't get a minute of notice. So I do a unit on communication skills using a package from TA Press on communicating styles technology. It's a course that I took when I was at Exxon many, many years ago. Have found it extremely valuable on learning how to communicate with others and be on their wavelengths, to know how your communication style is, what the other styles are, and make sure you're in sync with the person you're communicating with. Also, we work on written communications through required reports for those projects and the documentation of the projects, and through presentation skills through presenting their work at the end of the semester. Last night was the final presentations for this semester. It was really great stuff. All right, I mentioned teaching in compressed format. A few years ago, going back to 2006, the two largest petrochemical companies in China, Sinopec and CNPC, often known as PetroChina, undertook to want to have an energy-oriented executive MBA for their employees. So they hooked up with the University of Houston, which is ideally situated here in Houston, with a lot of faculty with energy background. For example, I mentioned I worked for 33 years with Exxon. We've got lots of former Pennzoil and Coke, and that's Coke, K-O-C-H, and other companies where they had prior experience, and they can bring that to the fore into the classroom. So rather than sending 30 or 35 people from Beijing to spend a year in the U.S., that would have been prohibitive, what we do is fly the profs over for an intensive 4-day course where we hold a 3-credit course in 4 intensive days. Goes from 8 in the morning till 6, and then in the evening working sessions. So I actually teach this business modeling course, kind of a blend of the two that I've described to you. I don't cover all the topics between the two, but the students do have to come up with a project that's live for them in their workplace and present it on day 4. And they do it. The presentations, that one that I mentioned on Turkmenistan in the pipeline, that was one on day 4 in November when I went over there and told them about optimization and simulation the first couple of days. And they really get it, and that's one of the points I want to emphasize. If you're new to this area, the leverage is absolutely phenomenal because people get it. The tools are relatively straightforward to use, and of course you have to be careful you don't jump in too quickly and do something you shouldn't do. But with a little bit of care, you can be incredibly productive in a very short amount of time. I also mentioned for the last couple of years, until recently, we've had teams of Libyan civil engineers and architects coming over to get an update on everything from road building to concrete structure to bridge building to water and sewage treatment plants to building apartments and houses. And it's a joint program that was being run by Rice and the University of Houston. And my bit was to run a decision-making course for those people. And again, in both of these cases, I should point out, these students came in and they didn't really know Excel at all. They didn't know how to do relative versus absolute copying in Excel. That means using the $ to kind of fix a row or a column when you're copying. So right from that very basic background, they really get it, and they can produce some very excellent projects. That hotel project I mentioned before was done by one of the Libyan students, as was the concrete plant project. Sure hope this thing settles down in Libya and we can get back to normal, those poor people over there. All right, tailoring the course to the interest of the audience, I think that's very important, and that's easily done. When I'm teaching energy courses, when I'm teaching the course in China to these energy people, or to select classes here in Houston with an energy focus, I draw examples from the energy business. If I was teaching in the Libyan cases, we did construction-related projects, or if I was to teach this in the Department of Construction Management in the College of Technology at the University of Houston. And because these tools are so general, simulation, optimization, analytic hierarchy, all of those, they can be used on any number of, in any field of study. So it's quite easy to adapt your projects or your examples to what the students are looking for to get. When you're teaching in that compressed format, you do have a short amount of time. In the case of China, I needed to send the information ahead and get it translated into Chinese. My PowerPoints, slides, and all of my spreadsheets were translated ahead of time into Chinese, and there were 2 projectors going up behind me. Most of the students did not speak or understand Chinese, so we had to rely on translation. However, as of this past November, there's now a version of Palisade software that is in Chinese, so that sure made that easy enough. But again, even with those barriers, the students could be very productive and produce projects on day 4. The Libyans, one little note that was of interest to me, as I was trying to help a Libyan student, I didn't realize that column A is off on the upper right, because of course they're reading from right to left. And I was having to, why can't I position my cursor in A1? And I kept going to K1, and it was frustrating until I realized what was going on. Kind of a humorous minor challenge. Well, that takes us 45 minutes into it, and I think Jameson wanted to allow some time for questions. So Jameson, maybe I'll stop right here and cut it over to you if you want to take control again, and I'd be happy to field some questions.
Phil, that was great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We do have some questions.
Okay.
This is going to be a great resource. I can even leave you. Do you want?
Okay. Yeah. You know, let me just see. I'll go back to event in progress, and there I am. So I return to the event. So tell me what I have to do to. Good. Now I can see it. Good. So I'm back to the desktop, and will I see the questions, or you'll feed them to me?
I'll just feed them to you, and that way they'll show up on our.
What would be an appropriate screen for them to stare at?
Oh,
like
I'll
there you go. That's perfect. Okay.
You mentioned efficient frontier. Do you cover data development analysis in your courses?
No.
We're healthcare, and we're exploring DEA for determining relative efficiency of our clinic.
Yeah, I've heard of that, but I have no personal experience with it. My guess is that it can, if I knew more about it, I could answer that affirmatively, but I can't say for sure. I just don't know enough about data development analysis. If the questioner wouldn't mind sending, well, I guess I can Google it and get back fast enough and comment on it. So I have no experience of actually applying it to data development analysis, but it sounds intriguing. Are you back on, Jameson?
Yes, I'm
okay.
Reading another question. I did want to tell everybody that this session is recorded, so I'll send everybody a link to the recording. And also, Phil, is it okay if I send out your PowerPoint presentation to anybody who wants it?
That would be fine.
Oh, good. And are you able to share any of your course syllabus, or do you have a course website that can be publicly accessible?
Yeah, I think if people go to that website on the Bauer College of Business, and they go either in the directory or certainly in the recording, is that, let me see if I can go back to that.
Oh, good. I'll find that link and I'll put that in.
Yeah, why don't you, do you have that, or should I guess you'd have to turn the thing back to me. So let me see if, I'll go back to the tab that I had. Here's the profile that I have of me. So
let's go to your,
you can go to the University of Houston College of Business website through the directory or directly through this link if you see it up here. Go to the website, and over here on the right you'll see the links. Now those might not have, now that I think about it, might not have detailed syllabi, but if that kind of teaser intrigues you, just drop me an email and I'll send you the syllabus.
Yes, because I'll And I'll send as many links as I can. Good. Well, let's see. Do we have any?
I see a question on working in information technology.
Well, do you plan on teaching any of your courses online?
Well, I guess that's two different questions, though. Is there a question here from Mr. or Ms. Orash that I'm looking at? Dr. Rogers, would you approach teaching decision-making science to students more geared toward working in IT?
Oh, good. I'm glad you got that. That was
okay, great. So is it appropriate if I answer that now?
Certainly.
Okay, so yes, you know, I do have a lot of IT students. I mean, they're working for Hewlett-Packard. They're working in IT organizations in various companies around Houston. And one of the key things is project selection. I worked in IT myself in Exxon for a long time, and we always had a bigger appetite from our users, our customers, basically people in the business, wanting to have us help them than we had ability to do. You know, there are e-commerce projects and web development and all of this stuff that they wanted us to do, and we didn't have the budget to do it all. So how do you select from those the best projects to do? So I'd say that kind of decision-making is a classic in IT. If that's what you meant, the old project selection problem is a classic that feeds into using decision science. It could also be involved in techniques like estimating the length of time it takes to do projects, or if you're doing project planning and you're an IT manager and you're supervising 20, 30 projects, they're not all going to be done exactly on time. Some are going to be complete early, some are going to go longer. Actually, Palisade has an updated tool that works with Microsoft Project that if you actually build a kind of a critical path network, you can actually then integrate the Palisade tools on top of that and do a better job of managing your IT projects. So I hope that gives you a flavor for an answer to that question. Then you mentioned another question about, I'm sorry, Jameson, you had started down another track when I...
Oh, sure. I had a whole other question. Do you plan on teaching any of your courses online?
Yes. This is an interesting evolution. This past semester, in that first course, students kept pressuring me to say, in spite of the fact that I try to conduct my classes I teach in a Socratic method to make sure people are understanding and getting it, inevitably in a class of 50, 60 people, someone just missed that point of exactly how do you correlate two variables in at risk. So what I've taken to do is, rather than wandering around the room that was my style, I sit in the front with my laptop open, and it's a tablet PC, and I turn on Camtasia. There are other products that do this as well. And I actually capture a movie of my desktop for the entire 3 hours I'm lecturing. These are evening classes that go from 6 to 9. And what it captures is my voice in perfect fidelity, and no one needs my picture or anything, and it captures the screen and every mouse movement. So as I'm developing these models and I'm clicking on, let's say, define distribution or whatever it is, students are seeing it. I take that file, which is quite big, but it gets what's called rendered and then converted into an MP4 file, which I then post on the university website class as a podcast, and they can download it using something called iTunes U. So they download it, and now, you know, the joke is, yeah, while we're working out, Professor Rogers, we're listening to your lecture on correlation of random variables. Also, it's posted only with you need the password directly to like a YouTube type format, these recordings. Now, that had me thinking when I asked the class, do you think this works as do you think it would work as an online class? And there was mixed reaction. The bottom line was, it could work as an online class, but it's better face-to-face. Now, to meet the need, because there's been growing demand for this course, as you see by, in fact, you know, I told you we started with 6. Now it's you know, hundreds and hundreds in the universe. Everybody wants to take it. So it certainly would be handy to offer as an online offering, and I plan to develop that for the College of Technology by the fall. Then going beyond that, you know, I don't know, maybe putting that in the public domain or somehow hooking up with a teaching company type thing. Maybe there's a market for that as well. Not sure. I hope that answers the question. If not, please come back to me with more.
That's excellent. And, I just wanted to say again, in my follow-up to this, I'll be sending out as many links, all the links that we've spoken about, and as well as the recording link. And if you watch this recording sometime in the future and have any questions, please feel free to email any of us here or get a hold of Phil, and he'll certainly write. That's no trouble there, is there?
That'll be fine.
Good, good. Well, do we have any more questions? I do have a number of questions here about the models that you have in your classes. I figured that they're probably not for sharing, but I just thought I'd broach that subject just since they probably belong to your students, basically.
Yeah, you know, I certainly have one-line descriptions of the over 100 projects, and I could, you know, probably make that available. And then if someone had a specific interest in a specific project, I could direct the person inquiring to the students who developed it.
For the students, certainly.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
you know, and I don't know, maybe they don't want to be inundated with queries, but I don't think, I mean, there aren't 3,000 people watching this thing, so certainly for
depends
the people.
On who's from.
Well, yeah, I mean, it comes along with a great job offer. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, no, that might be a way to do it. If someone had a particular interest in a particular project, you know, whether or not they'd want to say, sure, here are all the files. In fact, in several cases, the students are using dummy data. We had a couple of projects presented last night where dummy data had to be used because, you know, just people don't want it in the public domain. Their competitor, they don't want their competitors to know about it. You know, I'll give you a classic anecdote on that. I ran one of these classes where all the people were in the energy industry. It was like a Noah's Ark of the petrochemical industry. I had 2 from BP, 2 from Conoco, 3 from Exxon, 1 from Total. You name it, there were a couple from each, right? And as well, there was a guy from Halliburton, who, as you may know, supplies services to the oil companies. Well, this was in the period of escalating oil prices, and they knew all their customers were getting increased revenue. Their question was, how can we get a bigger piece of that pie? And obviously, in building a model, they didn't even want to reveal that to the other people in the class, because those are the people whose money they'd be taking, if you see what I mean. Not the particular students in the class, but, you know, corporate-wise. So you can understand, I think, in some cases, these models end up being proprietary. And, you know, for all I know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, and maybe some of these companies might not even want it to be known that they're working in these areas. So send me the query, and then I will try to take it further.
I'll include your email address in my outreach.
Fine.
That's no trouble.
That's great.
Oh, this has been a great resource. We really appreciate you doing this.
Sure.
The things we find out from a professor sometimes are really open up new avenues of thinking, and it really helps our whole staff, basically.
Yeah.
Especially our, you know, certainly our software users. This is a great resource, and this has been
well. And I have to say, you know, to return the compliment, Jameson, Palisade has been a huge resource to us too at the university. And has been extremely cooperative in helping us get, obviously there's something in it for them because more and more students are now becoming familiar with the tools, but that doesn't mean they have to do it in the full-blooded way they do. And I can't say enough about the support I've had from Palisade in running these courses. It's been fabulous.
Oh, great. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. certainly a good place to be here. So.
Yeah, and you know the people I'm talking about, whether it's you know, Jamie or Stan or Vince and Mark Maurice. You know, the whole yourself,
great.
Thompson. Just everybody is just fantastic.
Thompson even had a look at one of my models that I invented about a movie studio production slate, and that, you know, sent it back to me for more.
That's interesting. That's an example in the flaw of averages.
Diversification.
I really
that.
Yeah, he has, you know, like you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because a given film can either hit a home run or make you broke.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take the distribution of what films have done, would you be willing to have a portfolio of 5 films or 10 films, and what's the impact on your return?
Oh, I better read that.
Okay.
Yes. I think that's the third, you're certainly the third person who's told me to read that, so.
Uh-huh.
Oh, good. And I think actually 4, because Sam Savage said that I should read that.
Oh, real well. You ought to know. He wrote it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, we really appreciate this, and I know there's more questions. Please email me back, and Phil's email will be in my follow-up, and we'll continue the dialogue.
Yeah, anyone whose question didn't get answered, I will entertain by email.
Oh, great. Well, we better let you go.
Okay, thanks. So I guess the order of battle here is I hang up the phone and then you disconnect the WebEx session?
Yep.
Okay, thanks all for listening,
hey,
and thanks for hosting, Jameson.
Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.